On this episode of Locked On Lightning, I do something I never do, and that's eat my words. Coming up next, but first, let's play that music.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Denker. I want to thank all of you for making us your first listen of the day. And if you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Follow us wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We are also available on YouTube, so hit that subscribe button, hit that notification button, and drop a comment below. On this episode, I do exactly what I never do, and that is eat my words. I have been hosting this show for a couple of years now, and I have made some pretty bold proclamations on this show about this Lightning team. I have made some outlandish statements, admittingly so, on this show about this Lightning team at certain times. Have I overreacted? Everybody does from time to time. Have I been a little bit too harsh from time to time? Yes, I have. This season has been no exception. And, I always encourage you, the listener, to go ahead and, converse with me, whether it be on Twitter, whether it be on Instagram or on YouTube. And it was really brought to my attention because, and I love this. I love conversing with all you guys, loving hearing from all of you, the criticism, whether it be the good or bad criticism, that's what this show's all about. I don't feel like when I host this show that I'm just going out and talking to myself. I'm talking to all of you. And so a lot of you on the previous episode commented underneath on YouTube, and I appreciate that. And I, on the last episode, if you haven't already, I spoke about my concerns for this team. And a lot of you had, I believe there was 4 comments, but, you kind of all said the same thing. And, usually I kind of I don't really, I'll look at your comments and I'll, depending on what it is, I'll respond or I'll talk about it on the show, but never have I gotten these kind of comments before where I've actually taken a step back and reevaluated how I feel about this team and what I have said about this team. And so I'm going to start off by today's episode and just say, today's episode, we are not so much talking about the game from the other night in which the Lightning lost to Boston, which was a hard-fought game. I thought the Lightning played well. I thought it was what you would expect out of a stereotypical Boston-Tampa Bay matchup. We will we'll be recapping that game in detail tomorrow, Thursday, December 1st. So keep an eye out for that. But on this episode, I kind of wanted to take a step back. I wanted to reevaluate this team because after reading your comments and then kind of, thinking about some of the things I have said on this show this season, I have to say shame on me. I think, now that I've taken a day to kind of really think about it, I have to say I've been very harsh on this team, a lot more harsher than I normally am. There are times where I have dished out criticism to this team, and rightfully so. But lately, I think I've gone a little bit overboard with it, and I think a large part of that has to do with I have fallen victim to something that I often try to criticize or point out with other individuals that do follow this team. And that is, I haven't looked at this Lightning team for the body of work that they've put out thus far. I have looked at this Lightning team and have judged this Tampa Bay Lightning team based off of what they have done in previous seasons and have compared that to what we have seen in thus far early on in the season. And for that, if there are any Lightning players that listen to this podcast, and if you do, thank you for the support. I apologize. I apologize for the criticism. I have been harsh. I have, like I said, taken a step back, look at the numbers, look at the roster, look at the schedule. And what I have to say is that all things considered, when you look at what the cards that the Lightning were dealt to start this season, they lost some pieces in the offseason. We've spoken about that quite a bit on this show this season thus far. And then you mix in how the season started. You play the first 3 games of the season on the road. You come out of that 1-3, and then you kind of start to get it together. And you go on, and then you, as soon as it kind of seems like you're starting to get your feet underneath you after that win against the Islanders in early October, you're going to the West Coast, and we all know that could be very difficult for any East Coast team, regardless of where you are at in the season, how you're playing. And I did not take that into consideration early on. I said at that point in time that that would have been a road trip that I thought was going to be very beneficial. That was very important. Maybe I overbuilt the importance of that early on in the season, given it was week 3 of the regular season. So once again, shame on me, even though the Lightning did play very well on that road trip, I think, in my opinion. And then, you look at the month of November, and I said it to start the month. I thought it was a very tough schedule. You had a little bit of a sloppy game, and that's just, that's a little bit of an understatement against Ottawa. You have a tough game against Carolina. I greatly underestimated how Buffalo was going to be coming into the season, and I think some people did as well. But they beat Buffalo, and they just had a tough matchup against Buffalo previously, just 2 days ago, that they won that game in overtime. And then you play 3 very scrappy teams at that point in time at the beginning of November. And then you go up against Connor McDavid, who is arguably one of the best players on the planet, who is the best player on the planet, not arguably one of. He is the best player on the planet. The Lightning lose that game by a narrow margin. They lose a bad one on the road to Washington, come back, bounce back against Washington, where, whether what you want to say about the Capitals, where they are in time with, their roster, I think, if I think I look at them as maybe right now as a solid middle of the pack team. Ovi looks revitalized. You kind of always, I guess I wouldn't say figure, but you would kind of think at this point in his career, you would start to see some sort of slowdown. But this whole chase on to get up to Gretzky in the all-time goals standings is definitely something that has revitalized him, that is injecting new life into him, and he's playing fantastic hockey. And then right after you play against those guys, you go up against Dallas, who, if you've been a listener of this show, as well as the Locked On NHL Thursday slot with me and my co-host Chris Masilli of Locked On Avalanche, we are big Dallas Stars guys. We both think that they are a very good team, and especially with that top 5 goaltending that they have in Jake Ottinger, this team is going to be one of the bigger, I guess I wouldn't say surprises, but a team that maybe not a lot of people would have thought at the end of last year would have been making as much noise as they are right now. And then you play Calgary at home. You win a pretty solid, good one at home, 4-1. And then you pick up an overtime win against Nashville. You fall to Boston at home. We've spoken about that on the previous episodes. You pick up a win against St. Louis, and you split a back-to-back against two very tough teams, one of whom is one of the best teams in the National Hockey League. So all things considered, looking at that schedule, you know, backtracking what I have thought about this team in recent weeks, because I will admit I am one of the first people to admit when I am wrong, especially in sports. We all make mistakes with this stuff. And it's funny that I'm going to say this because I don't know who it was. I don't even think it was a Lightning fan. If you are, I'm sorry, but one listener commented on one of our episodes calling me Stuart Little, saying that the sky was falling. And yes, yeah, was I kind of had that mentality to start the season, saying that expecting the worst. Yeah, I've been overly negative, to say the least, and but looking at the schedule that the Lightning have had thus far, I would say it's very much a huge accomplishment to not only have 27 points, but be in the top three of the Atlantic Division. Detroit is a very tough team. I expect Florida, who is nipping on their heels with 3 points behind, to really start to get things going. But to Tampa to be where they are after the start that they got off, finishing October 5-4, going on the West Coast early, like I said, this team has overexcelled given the cards that they were dealt early on. They have picked each other up. Like I've said, that Vasilevsky hasn't been exactly picture perfect, but thus far the record speaks for itself. This is a good hockey team. There's tons of room for improvement, of course, and that's why you play 82 games and not 22. So the Lightning have 60 more games to kind of get to where I'm sure, and we all are, I'm sure, know where they want to be, and that's at the top of this division. So in the second segment of this episode, we'll be talking about some of the players on this team. I have a lot of apology notes to hand out to some of the players on this team that I have to say, on the last episode, I kind of maybe over criticized the makeup of this team. I am not really giving certain players their due. We'll talk about that in just a bit. But first, I want to remind all of you that this episode of Locked On Lightning is brought to you by BetOnline. Now, BetOnline is your number one source for all your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball, soccer, and esports. They've got it all at betonline.net. And they got the fastest and easiest way to get your sports betting fix now. And I love about betonline.net is that their odds are fantastic. You can't get any better odds anywhere else. I myself am a terrible sports gambler, yet I continue to not take advantage of the odds. But you can at betonline.net. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Now, like I said, this isn't an episode of recapping the previous win. We're talking about that tomorrow on Thursday's episode. So keep an eye out for that. This is a redemption episode. This is a redemption episode for me, your host of this show. And I listen to all of you. Like I said, when I talk on this show, I'm not sitting here talking to myself into a microphone or into a camera if you're watching on YouTube. I am talking directly to you, the listener, and in return, I am listening to what you are all saying, your reception or your reviews or whatever, usually your comments. That's the easiest way for me to see everything on YouTube. So once again, go ahead and like and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. So Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, we are available wherever podcasts are distributed. And of course, give us a follow on our YouTube page, subscribe, hit that thumbs up, comment below. And then as well on our social media pages, LO_Lightning on Twitter, as well as Locked On_Lightning on Instagram, and give me a follow on Twitter at DankyDank, DenkyD8NK. If you slide in my DMs, hit me up with a comment or whatever. I usually try to get back to all of you as soon as possible. I've been kind of slacking with that over the past week or so. So I got to get back on that. So if you've been messaging me and I didn't get back to you yet, I'm sorry. But yeah, we are talking on this episode redemption solely for me, because on the previous episode, was very overcritical of this Lightning team thus far. I was not happy, or have not been happy with this Lightning team, how they have started. And, just like athletes, sometimes get in their own head. We do it too. Podcast hosts, people who are in sports, we get it. We get in our own heads too about certain things. We get our emotions get the best of us, and I did certainly so. I have been for a couple of weeks now, probably the whole season. Let's be honest. But I saw what all of you commented on, and yeah, this team, like I said in the first segment, all things considered, with what the schedule has been structured, with Zach Bogosian being out, with Anthony Cirelli being out, and I did him I did not do him any honor, Anthony Cirelli, in talking about him, because like I said that, where is this help going to come from this Lightning team, in the future, if there are moves that need to be made. And, I'm looking at the stats. I've looked at the stats, and I haven't really been able to it didn't really hit me until the other day, but really, this Lightning team, like I said, all things considered, have been playing very good hockey, at times frustrating, inconsistent, but still, you have the same guys that come up for you time and time again: the Kucherovs, the Stamkos, Point, Sergachev. Like I say at the beginning of the year, how important it was going to be for him to have a good year. And thus far, to start off the season, he has had 22 points. 4 of those are goals. Another player that has made me eat my words is Alex Killorn. 18 points this year, 7 goals. It's crazy. We were talking how a couple of years ago we were talking about this franchise trying to look for a way to get rid of Alex Killorn, or to not because he was a bad player, but it was because they were trying to free up some cap space. Obviously, that did not work out, and last year was a little bit disappointing for Alex Killorn, at least in my eyes. You kind of start to see him slow down towards the end of the season, and then you kind of basically saw him pull a vanishing act throughout the entire playoffs. So, I took that performance and I've brought that into this season, and I kind of let that overshadow what Killer has done this year. He has done a very good job, not only scoring goals when the Lightning have needed some momentum, but he has been able to set up guys for chances, or at least involve himself in chances, to where he is at least giving his teammates chances to score goals, whether it be just, a shot on net that leads to a rebound by a putback by another player on the Lightning, or it's just, him making, these little passes here and there to set up his teammates. Another guy that I was criminally overcritical of on the last episode, and is Brandon Hagel. I was very frustrated, and have been, and I think a lot of it has been with, given that trade that the Lightning made last year for Brandon Hagel. A lot was made when that trade was made, that, look at what he's done in Chicago with Patrick Kane. Can we see Brandon Hagel carry over that goal scoring mentality here in Tampa? And we got a completely different Brandon Hagel. I believe he only had 7 points throughout his entire time during the regular season, the rest of the season with Tampa, and really struggled offensively, but still played very well, was still able to make a contribution by playing physical, kind of something I believe at the time I compared it to almost somewhat of what we saw from Yanni Gord in years past. Not on the level of Yanni Gord being able to contribute on all facets of the game, but that ability to be somewhat undersized and to be able to play physical and to do the little things right to allow your teammates around you to be better. And I chalk that up to, being in a new environment. And not everyone's going to have a Nick Paul type-esque performance when you come to Tampa. And it's ironic that I say that because Brandon Hagel has one more point than Nick Paul. But yeah, I think Brandon Hagel, all things considered, 22 games played, majority of that on the first line. I mean, he's been all over the place as well, but 17 points, 7 goals, 7 of those are goals. All things considered, and like I said, not a lot, but there's been a majority of factors why we kind of saw a shaky Lightning team, and also a large part of that has to do with Anthony Cirelli not having your anchor centerman on your second line. Kind of, believe it or not, some people might look at that as, not so much as a big deal, but the Lightning have definitely missed 71 at times this season. And guys have stepped up. And when you don't have a guy down the middle like an Anthony Cirelli, and you have guys like a Brandon Hagel, like a Nick Paul, coming up, tallying the points the way they are, it really makes a world of difference. And really, when you look at it, not only Brandon Hagel and Nick Paul, but when you look at what Mikhail Sergachev has been able to do, what Alex Killorn has been able to do, Nick Pervix, what he has done early on in his NHL career. I don't think anybody could have predicted this kind of performance early on in the season, especially from Nick Pervix, especially with Bogosian out. Guys have stepped up. And some people, including myself, may not have not noticed it until now. Gone over the tape, gone over the numbers, and it shows. And that's the thing that is always what I've always loved the most about this Lightning team, about this Lightning organization, especially over the last couple of years, is that you'll have guys that are quietly putting up 17 points, like a Brandon Hagel, like a Nick Paul, Alex Killorn. While, like I said, Bogosian missing time, Cirelli out, Victor Hedman, no one really not knowing what's going on with the big Swede, missed a couple of games here and there due to injury with an upper body, I believe it was, and he's just not looking like himself this year. He is 32, but age really isn't a number. Really, it's really not something that you're going to see that's really going to show its point. I mean, 32 is not old in the NHL, at least in my mind, especially what you see other guys like Ovechkin doing still in his career and the longevity other players have. So, the fact that you have these little things here and there working against you in your favor, the fact that you have these other contributions from other guys that are coming in on a nightly basis and doing this regularly, it's really amazing to see. And like I said before in the previous segment, it really is phenomenal and pretty incredible to see that this Lightning team is in the third spot and fighting hard for that third spot. And I expect them to continue to play like that. I expect them to kind of right now. I kind of feel like it's kind of just like a sitting and waiting until you get other guys clicking for this Lightning team. And if they could play like this, until you get performances like a stereotypical Vasilevsky, until Cirelli comes back and we start to see Anthony Cirelli doing Anthony Cirelli things, you start to see, maybe Victor Hedman starts to get a little bit of a resurgence in his offensive play. And also on the back end, too, there are certain plays I've mentioned on past episodes where it just doesn't seem like this year Victor Hedman is getting to those plays or getting to those corners or getting to that puck that we've seen him do in years past. So, there are a lot of things that are working in the Lightning's favor, but there are also a lot of things that are working against them. And it's a good thing to see that those positives and negatives are canceling each other out. So wrapping things up on this show once again, this is a show of redemption for yours truly. That the last show kind of I did come off as kind of ungrateful, out of touch, which I'm not. I love this team. I think this Lightning team is very talented. I really what it came down to is me getting absolutely nuts, and being a 10 on the nut scale. And now I'm back down to earth. And it's all because of you guys, the listeners, the watchers. So thank you for that, for bringing me back down to earth. So looking at the Lightning schedule, after, dropping last night's game to the Boston Bruins 3-1 at the Garden, you got Philly tomorrow night. I'm recording this Wednesday night, so you got Philly tomorrow night, which is a good matchup. Anytime you play against a metropolitan team, regardless of where they are in the standings, I think that's a good matchup. It's kind of a good measuring stick for you because in years past, the last couple of years at least, the Metropolitan has been like the cream of the crop in terms of division. And the Atlantic Division has, I feel like the Atlantic Division has had their soft spots. You've kind of, usually that 7-8 seeded teams in the standings have kind of been very weak. But, this year things have changed. So, it's also very good to kind of keep yourselves fresh in terms of that high level of competition on the East Coast when you're going from an Atlantic Division rival and playing against a metropolitan. I think it's a good transition from going from Boston, which is a very physical game, which is a very mentally taxing game. If you look at the numbers real quick, like I said, we'll do a full recap of the game tomorrow, alongside with a preview episode for the Philly game. But Boston put on 26 hits versus the Lightning's 15. And then both these teams were kind of hovering around the 15 mark in terms of blocks. So this was a very demanding game physically. So when you go like that to another team in the Philadelphia Flyers, who historically is known for playing physical, that's something that I like to see. I would rather the Lightning play in these kind of games, these kind of physical, high intensity games, rather than you kind of see the kind of free flowing hockey games that we might see here and there, where you don't see that much hitting. You see a lot more, kind of focus on sequences of offensive attacks. I like these games. I like these defensive-minded physical games because they force a team like the Lightning, who I think they're one of the best teams in the league when they play this way. And you saw it the other night against Boston. Even though they did lose, I thought that they played very well. I think that the Lightning, when they have to keep themselves honest, I think they're a better hockey team. And I think we're going to see more of that, keeping yourself honest, against the Philadelphia Flyers tomorrow night, Thursday. So keep an eye on that. Like I said, we'll be coming out with an episode discussing the loss against Boston, and then discussing tomorrow night's game against the Flyers, and then probably not too sure yet. I do want to get a post-game episode out. Not sure when it will drop. It could be maybe around close to midnight, so keep an eye out for that. That's why you got to keep those notifications on. Hit that subscribe button, whether you're on an audio platform or on YouTube, so as soon as the newest episode drops, you'll be notified. So in the meantime, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Tanker. I'll talk to you in the next one.